let's start it off with what we need to talk about. Some trials are all about data. The evidence is technical, analytical, numbers on a chart. Some trials are all about stories, the witnesses, what they witnessed, how they acted then, how they act on the stand. And then there's the Karen Read trial, right? Actually, Karen Read trials, right? So today alone, day 6 of testimony in Read's second trial for allegedly killing her boyfriend, the jury got everything I just described and more. The drama came from a prosecution witness named Jennifer McCabe, reprising her testimony about the night John O'Keefe was either hit and killed by Karen Read's SUV, as prosecutors claim, or was beaten to death inside of a house party where McCabe was also a guest, as the defense claims. Now, on the technical side, the defense put a ding in the prosecution's theory that the victim never set foot in the house where Read dropped him off, because for one thing, his iPhone apparently showed he walked at least 36 steps. For another, the defense asserted it was possible O'Keefe unlocked his phone with Face ID and possibly looked at a text. And as it happened, that text was from Jennifer McCabe. On the stand today, just as she did at last year's trial, McCabe described Karen Read as hysterical, screaming, repeating herself over and over when John didn't come home. She talked about the broken taillight on Karen Read's Lexus. She claimed Read said, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" And when she described finding John O'Keefe in the snow, she seemed to tear up. Well, sort of. You be the judge.
When you see Carrie removing the snow from John's face, what do?
I was frozen. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that was him just lying there.
Tell us what you're seeing.
What do I see? I see Carrie just wiping the snow off. Karen had straddled him and had lifted her shirt and his shirt and was laying on him, and Carrie was screaming at her to get off of him. And I was literally just stunned. I mean, there he was.
What did John look like when you saw him?
I couldn't see much but his face, because the rest was snow and Karen was moving over him, but he just looked like just him, but just like frozen.
What did you do?
At first, I just stood there for a minute because I couldn't believe it was him. And then Carrie Roberts and I made eye contact. And I knew, I was like, all right, I'm going to call 911. But I think I knew in that moment that John, was dead.
Now, McCabe's testimony ended today just before her infamous Google search, "How long to die in the cold?" How long to die in the cold. There was a misspelling there. That's coming tomorrow, along with what's sure to be a really interesting cross-examination. Let's talk about it. I'm joined right now by Mark Betterow, a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor who's been following the case since the beginning. He almost joined the defense team, in fact, and currently represents the blogger known as Turtle Boy, who's been covering the case. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so was today a major win for anybody?
I think the defense had a very good day today, not so much with Jennifer McCabe, who's still on direct examination, so they haven't been able to establish anything with her yet, but the witness before her, the cell phone expert for the prosecution, a man named Ian Whiffen, who is supposed to be a very compelling and necessary witness for the prosecution if they're going to win this case. And what you had was the defense put some dents into the prosecution's case by having the witness concede that he could not exclude that John O'Keefe did not go in the house, that his phone did not go into the house. He established that John O'Keefe's phone was used at 12:32 a.m., which is important because the prosecution's theory is that he was struck and killed by a car at 12:31, and it begs the obvious question, how could he be using his phone, his Face ID, touching the side of it if he's already hit?
But just to press you on that, I mean, they also said the phone was inactive from 12:31, 12:32 until 6 a.m. And here's the thing. So Mr. Whiffen, I think, is an important witness. Why? A few things. So he said yesterday that it would be a reasonable assumption that the phone was by the flag post, right? That was by the yard, meaning that the phone never went into the house. Also talked about the temperature of John O'Keefe's phone, that it started decreasing quite rapidly, which would indicate that the phone was outside outside and never inside the house. And if we say we're coupling the phone with John O'Keefe, it helps the prosecution say that John O'Keefe never was in the house. That felt like compelling evidence and something that the prosecution has been relying on, because I don't remember from the first trial, at least the battery evidence.
No, I don't think there was the battery evidence in the first trial, but I'm not sure it actually helps the prosecution as much as people think, because although the temperature clearly came down on the battery, it kind of levels out dramatically several hours later and drops at a much less rate of temperature drop, which may suggest it was actually in some other place, a garage or some other location, not just sitting outside. And the expert did his own test showing that a phone would drop precipitously, the temperature would continue to drop, but there's no explanation for why at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, it would just, the rate of decline would stop dramatically.
So let's talk about phones for a second. Let's talk about Jennifer McCabe. Really, the big thing is how long to die in the code. Now, the defense would say she looked that up at 2:25,
2:27.
2:27, right, before John O'Keefe's body was discovered. She'd only be looking that up if she was part of the cover-up. She knew that he was dead. She was a part of it. Now, the prosecution put in evidence from this expert to say, wait a minute, she had opened up a tab earlier on in the day to look for something else, and you can use that tab to look something up at 6:30 in the morning or 6 in the morning. The timestamp would say, this timestamp wouldn't change, but it doesn't necessarily mean you looked for that. You searched for that at 2-something in the morning, which, by the way, if she really did search for that, she searches for that and then looks up the other miscellaneous things she's looking at. She's a part of a murder and then looks up, what, sports teams or things like that. That's the part that seems, to me at least, that seems compelling evidence that she had a window open but didn't really search for how long to die in the cold until after John O'Keefe's body was found. What's your answer to that?
Well, in the first instance, you have to consider the full context of the 2:27 search. There's going to be evidence, as there was in the first trial, that at 2:22 and 2:23, two other key witnesses, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert, were apparently butt-dialing each other back and forth.
That's weird. Yeah, I agree with you. It's weird.
And that's followed right after this alleged Google search. Now, the prosecution expert clearly says, look, it wasn't at 2:27. He's using his own program, by the way, that he created. The defense is going to have an expert who's going to say it was at 2:27 and it was a deleted search, one of only 4,500 approximate searches on her phone. One was deleted. It just happened to be that one.
But doesn't it seem like if she really was part of this cover-up, this murder, she'd be a little more panicked? Here's the part that I don't understand, okay, right? I don't understand the motive. And I know motive's not an element of a crime, and especially for the defense, they don't have to prove it. But I can understand the prosecution's story here, that either Karen Reed was so upset at John O'Keefe, she deliberately backed up the SUV to run him over, might be shaky, or that she was heavily intoxicated, ran him over recklessly, realized she might have done it, couple that with the idea of, did I hit him? Did I hit him questioning it? I don't quite understand what would be the motive for John O'Keefe to go in that house. There's some fight that breaks out. They beat him up, leave him to die, put him outside, and then, my goodness, they frame Karen Reed, and how lucky for them that she goes, and says, allegedly, I hit him, says things that implicate herself. It seems to me, I just don't understand what would be the reason that he would be killed by people in that house.
Well, you may not know the reason, but the framework of the defense starts with science before you even get to what happened in the house. They're going to have expert witnesses, biomechanical engineers, and people with degrees that could go on longer than our arms. And what these individuals are going to say is that there was no accident that's consistent with the damage on the vehicle and damage with the car. And certainly the science would control. And you have to also factor in the burden of proof here. The defense has no burden.
Sure.
Prosecution's got to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. If these witnesses are credible that there was no accident, then the rest of this is all excess.
I agree, and I've said this to you before we went on air. I cover cases all the time where you hear the defense say this is a tainted investigation, the investigators had tunnel vision. It's a common argument. This is the only one where I say you actually should really listen up. I think they were given a gift with Michael Proctor, okay, lead investigator in this case, right? Completely sloppy, said horrible things about Karen Reed. I get it. But the idea that taillight would be taken and planted at the scene, that there would be this deliberate effort to frame Karen Read. There's so much effort to be put into that. The jury might not need a motive, and they might not need an explanation, but don't they have to say what's reasonable here, what's common sense?
You do, but again, you start with the science. If there is no car accident, but there are 45 or thereabout taillight pieces scattered along the lawn, then how did they get there? If it's not a natural consequence of a car accident, then they got there in some other way. And, you know, your first instinct is to say, come on, how could that be? But then you enter the world of Michael Proctor, and it's not just that he's sloppy, he's corrupt. I mean, he's terminated from employment because of his conduct in this case. He was found to have been biased in this investigation, amongst other things. Beyond looking for nudes, beyond wishing that she would kill herself.
Horrible.
He was found to be biased, so it becomes more plausible. Is there a timeline that it fits? The evidence is going to show in this case that there is a timeline, and then you get to a series of text messages and behavior by Jennifer McCabe, Brian Higgins, Brian Albert, and others who begin texting each other in the days following in a way that is not natural or normal for people who are doing nothing but grieving the loss of their friend.
I agree with you. There's weird stuff, right? Yeah. Why did Brian Albert allegedly not come out of the house? Why was his house not searched? I get it. There's weird stuff. There's a lot for the defense to work with, and she's got great lawyers. Here's the part. Talking about Jen McCabe, right? She said how hysterical Karen Read was, that she was screaming over and over, that Read allegedly said, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? You couple that with Read's statements that she did in the media, which are key pieces of evidence for the prosecution here about speculating if she hit John O'Keefe. You couple that with the testimony of the first responder, Timothy Nuttall, who said, you know, Karen Read said, I hit him. It feels hard to square away why she would have said those things unless she might have had an indication she thought she hit him.
Well,
and let me just add one more thing. The testimony today, too, that while they're searching for John O'Keefe in the snow, Karen Read says, there he is, there he is. How did she know where the body was?
Well, I don't know how she knows where the body is. They're driving there. She comes upon the scene. She sees it. But again, when you talk about statements of did I hit him versus I hit him, you have to consider the credibility of the witnesses. I mean, you take the first witness, the EMT Nuttall. He's a guy who the evidence showed testified a year before that he was as certain as anything that John O'Keefe was wearing a puffy coat like the Michelin Man would wear, right? And it turns out he was wearing a light hoodie, and that he then said his memory got better a year later. He said I heard him say, I heard her say, excuse me, I hit him twice after I met with the prosecution and another investigator. Now I heard it 3 times. Then you heard Jennifer McCabe say today, well, Karen says everything in 3s. I mean, it feels somewhat contrived.
What are you expecting from Jennifer McCabe's testimony tomorrow? What do you expect the defense to do?
Well, I expect them to expose a series of inconsistent statements that she's made over the course of the investigation. You know, you talk about, she says, I hit him and all these things. Her first statement to the police is nothing of the sort. That comes after the police leave and she meets with the family, has an epiphany, calls the police back and says, I think Karen said, did I hit him? And as the investigation went on and on, that kind of morphed into, I hit him. So I think, you know, that's certainly going to be a primary focus of her cross-examination, as is the text chain between these family members, which don't make sense. I mean, they bring witnesses to their house to be interviewed by Michael Proctor and other cops, and then they're live texting what's happening in these interviews, telling each other she's telling them everything. This is very
Well, wasn't that the idea
behavior.
she's telling them everything, like telling too much about the relationship between John O'Keefe and Karen Read? Not that anything to do with the killing, but the idea, like, you're talking about their dirty laundry.
I think that's a hard sell, again, and you have to look at the full context of these messages. I mean, there are messages saying, tell them the guy, their close friend, by the way, but privately, tell them the guy never went in the house. That's a damning message. Why would these people say the story you've got to sell to the media is tell them the guy never went in the house? I mean, you saw Jennifer McCabe today appear to get emotional.
Yeah.
I'm not sure she did. I mean, it looked...
Well, second time she testified, you know, it's about a few years old.
Well, she said when she found him that she got all choked up and nothing came out today. But when you listen to the 911 call, which will come in probably in her direct tomorrow, she's as cool as a cucumber.
Shock?
It's not her friend John O'Keefe lying dead on the lawn, it's a man.
Yeah.
And then when you see the dash cam video of the police car, she literally turns her back and appears very calm, cool, collected.
I hope everybody can follow this, by the way, because you and I know this case very well. Hopefully we're explaining it perfectly to everybody. I want to know your opinion about the jury view. I'm torn about jury views, whether they're helpful or not. Going to 34 Fairview, Brian Albert's home, where John O'Keefe's body was found, do you think that helped the jury at all? And who did it help?
It helped the prosecution a little, only because of the timing of when it occurred. It occurred way too early in the case. None of the witnesses who were inside of the house or in that vicinity had even testified. If they had, I think that would favor the defense. I mean, you talked about Brian Albert not coming out. The windows that were his bedroom you could spit from those windows to the flagpole. It's that close if you've ever been to that yard. The jury doesn't know that right now, so they may not be taking that in. All these people inside who apparently didn't hear a car go screeching in reverse, 25 miles an hour, smash into John O'Keefe. They didn't hear it, but we don't know, the jury doesn't know how far away that is, what happened. Nobody saw a body that should have been lying on the lawn. Literally, none of them. They all drove right by it with their bright lights pointing right where the body was. The jury may not yet have that in sight. So
Snowplow driver didn't see it either, apparently.
Snowplow driver didn't see it either.
By the way, I'm pushing you because I know which position you take, so it's not necessarily, I'm kind of divided about what I believe about happened. I think we both can concede. Big mistake for Karen Read to do media interviews in the midst of an investigation before her retrial. How much of an effect do you think that's having on the jury, and why do you think she did it?
It's hard to tell how much of an effect it's having, other than to say at this point it appears to be their strongest evidence, which is, again, why did you do it?
Because she basically says, she speculates, did she hit him?
It's a mistake to do those kinds of things during, that are going to be used against you at a trial. Now, a lot of those videos were made during the first trial. I'm sure the assumption was there won't be a second trial, but there is a second trial, so there's no question it hurts. I can only assume that they chose to do it to just kind of get the story out to somehow favor them, but there's no question, at least as it's being used in the second trial, it doesn't favor them.
Do you think she's going to take the stand? She's been very vocal to the media outside court. She's been very vocal in these media interviews. She didn't take the stand the first time. I wonder, do you think she'll, what advantage would there be for her to take?
I don't think, first of all, it's unnecessary, and I think it would be too risky. And, I'm obviously not counseling her on what she does, but no, I don't think she'll take the stand.
I have to ask you this question. You're free to not ask it any which way. I know you represent Turtle Boy. Anything you want to say about that? We talked before that you're limited in what you can say. Anything you can say about it?
No, I should keep those thoughts to myself.
That's
for now.
fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Okay, so what is another piece of prosecution evidence you're going to be looking out for? Because they talked about the battery evidence that was going to be important. Is there another piece of evidence that you're going to be looking out for the prosecution that the defense really needs to counteract?
Well, I think what's going to be interesting is the prosecution accident reconstruction person, because they know what's coming from the defense side. They have fought like hell to keep it out. Even today, they were there arguing these witnesses shouldn't be allowed to testify. So at the first trial, the person they used to do their accident reconstruction was a Massachusetts State Police trooper who, to be kind, was not a good witness. They've hired a private company. We'll have to see what they have to say. But again, they can't just neutralize the defense witnesses. They have to carry it and convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the defense witnesses are bad. That's going to be a tough burden.
This is a tough case, let me tell you. We went through a lot of it. Mark Betterow, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure,
Appreciate
thanks for having
it.
me.
Thank you. When we first met Angie Solomon, she was accusing her ex-husband, a former Tennessee news anchor, of causing the death of the couple's 18-year-old son. That was more than a year ago. Ashleigh had her on this show as a guest. But lately, Solomon's been in the news again for a very different reason. Why? A couple weeks ago, she was charged with solicitation to commit first-degree murder, legalese for allegedly hiring a hitman. And whom exactly did Solomon allegedly want hit? Her ex-husband, Aaron Solomon. Now, no such murder ever happened, thankfully, because as usually happens in these kinds of cases, the hired gun was an undercover cop who was wearing a wire. So when the alleged client told him she wanted Aaron Solomon, quote, under the ground and asked to pay for it out of a family trust, After the fact, it was all on tape. And today, it was played in court. I want you to hear it and notice how surprised Solomon sounds when she finds out the price.
How much we talking? Well, something like this, about 5,000.
That's all.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm laughing, but he's worth it. He's not worth it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but let me just tell you something.
It's a risk I'm taking.
I pray for
so.
hate.
Do you have any cash or anything? Can you go to an ATM or
I don't
give me anything
I'm
down?
so broke.
You got any jewelry, anything of value that you could give me to?
I sold everything I owned for us to live.
What about giving me the registration until we settle this up?
That's what George and I talked about. I don't even have. I mean, I have the registration,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're not talking about the whatever that's called, the owner. Gosh, I'm afraid to get into the paperwork on it. I don't mind giving it to you, but I'm afraid to get into the paper with my name.
I'm afraid of getting stiffed. That's what I'm afraid of.
Now, tape or no tape, Solomon pleaded not guilty today, and the judge cut her bond in half, from $500,000 to $250,000. I'm joined right now by my friend Lauren Conlon, host of the hugely popular true crime podcast, The Outlier, and Pop Crime TV on YouTube. Lauren, so good to see you.
Thank you so much.
I know this is difficult for you because you not only knew Angie, you had her on your podcast multiple times. What has this been like for you to learn this news? And I have to ask, was there anything in your conversations with her that would give you any indication she might allegedly do something like this?
No, there was nothing in our conversations indicating that she would allegedly do something like this. And I dedicated almost a year to investigating her son's death, which I still find to be very odd, and many people find it to be very odd. So I had a whole separate podcast centered around her family. And this family is, they've gone through a lot. Now, the death of Angie's son in 2020 was very sad, very mysterious to a lot of us. Her daughter, Gracie, went on YouTube when she was 14 years old and made allegations against her father. And Angie has made it very known that she believes that her ex-husband, Aaron Solomon, is behind her son's death. And her ex-husband has never been arrested, never been charged. But again, it's very well known. So I was shocked, I was sad, but my heart really goes out to Gracie right now. I mean, she should be focusing on, you know, her senior skip day or her senior pranks, and now she's got this to deal with.
Do you know how she's doing?
I mean, there were images of her in the courtroom today I saw on the stream, and she was sobbing.
Yeah.
She's very close to her mom. Angie and Gracie, you know, they felt like they were all they had when Grant passed away. And they were a very strong trio, Angie, Gracie, and Grant. So it's awful.
If you assume these allegations are true, the why is interesting. What would be the reason that she'd want to hire somebody to kill Aaron? Because she called it vigilante justice, and that the deaths of many people, including children, would be prevented by taking out her ex-husband. Can you explain what the motivation might be here, or at least what's being laid out by authorities?
That was interesting. She did make a lot of allegations about human trafficking on that recording, and I can't really speak to any of that, but I can speak to the fact that she made it very clear she was doing this for her daughter and for her son, because she believes that her ex-husband killed her son, and she believes that her ex-husband abused her daughter. And again, he has never been charged for any of this, but this is what Angie believes, and she does feel like no one has listened to her, law enforcement, you know, and just the public in general.
She had indicated, or allegedly indicated, she may have wanted 2 other people killed too. Do you know who those people might be?
It sounded like they may have been political, possibly. I mean, I did get an email from the courts after saying that they actually kicked her case over to the circuit courts, which kind of led me to believe that there possibly could be other charges coming if they get this in front of a grand jury. I mean, that was very scary, but no, I don't know any of the specifics behind that.
The judge dropped her bond to $250,000. Can she cover that? Do you know?
I don't think so. I mean, you heard her. She said that she was broke, and I mean, they have a fundraiser, but I think that's going to be very, very tough, Jesse.
Has Angie reached out to you since this has happened? Do you know if she's attempted to or anything like that?
No, and I actually hadn't spoken to her in probably a year. You know, life happens. It was tough for me to investigate this case all the way in New York. It's in Tennessee. But I have to say, this case right now, the murder for hire plot, I mean, it's serious. It's a Class B felony. That's 8 to 12 years in Tennessee. But I do think after hearing this recording, if she had a good defense attorney, she might be able to poke some holes here.
What makes you say that?
Well, I never heard her say, I want you to kill him. I heard her say, I mean, and look, I felt like,
ground, you know.
well, she said he needs to be in jail or under the ground. And then the undercover TBI agent kind of led her a little bit. He was like, well, what do you want? And then, you know, I felt like a lot of his questions were a bit leading, and she never gave him a title to her car. It was a registration, and you can't transfer a car, you know, with a registration, and she didn't give him any money, so it's tough. I feel like there is some reasonable doubt there.
What is the online community saying? Because you're not the only one who followed this case. A lot of people, and when I say this, I mean about what happened to Grant, but what are people saying online about this?
I mean, it's mixed.
It is,
I'll
right?
be honest. There's a lot of people saying, well, this woman has been screaming for help for over a decade. No one's listened. I'm not surprised. And then there's the other side that's like, hey, they're both crazy. I do feel really, really bad for both Angie and Gracie, and I know that might be not the best thing to say right now while she is awaiting trial for a murder for hire plot, but I do feel like this family has been through it.
Was Aaron in court?
He was in court.
What was that like?
I mean, they kind of panned the camera over to him a few times. He didn't really make any type of expression. He kind of just sat there somber, but I know that, God, Gracie, when I told you, when they panned to her, she was a mess. And I don't think there was any communication between them at all. They don't speak. So it's tough.
What about full circle here? The son's death, right? Grant's death. Is it still an active investigation?
Well, interestingly enough, on the 911 call, Aaron Solomon had mentioned 3 witnesses, and these witnesses had never come forward. And it's been over 5 years. And I called the Gallatin police after getting some information that 2 of the 3 witnesses may have come forward. And it turns out they did come forward. What they said, and I received this updated report from the Gallatin police, it kind of, it was a little confusing. They actually said that they saw Grant's truck go down this hill, and the next thing that they knew, they were kind of swerving out of the road because they thought the truck was going to go into the highway. Right. And then all of a sudden, Grant disappeared underneath his truck, and he looked like a pretzel, they said. This was a little bit confusing for me because I spoke to the EMT, the first EMT that was on the scene. He never said anything about Grant looking like a pretzel. So again, I still have a lot of questions here.
I think a lot of people do. This is just another complex layer to this case. Lauren Conlon, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Good seeing you.
At age 12, she believed in a fictional boogeyman, a tall, faceless monster in a black suit created by other young people on the internet. His name was Slender Man. And the power he held over young Morgan Geyser was so magnetic that she was willing to kill for him. And she very nearly did. Morgan is not 12 years old anymore. She's almost 23. And she's been locked up in a mental health facility ever since the horrifying day that she stabbed a little friend of hers 19 times. In 2014, Morgan and another little friend named Anissa Weir lured their 12-year-old friend Peyton Lautner into the woods, and they jumped Peyton. Here's some of what Morgan told the police back then.
What were you trying to do with her when you stabbed her?
Kill her. I might as well just say it. We were trying to kill her. I don't know why it was necessary that it was her, but it seemed very necessary.
Why did you trick her to get down there?
We said that we were going to go bird watching. People who trust you become very gullible, and it was sort of sad.
Miraculously, despite being stabbed 19 times, Peyton survived. That little 12-year-old girl crawled to a bike path and was rescued by a passerby. Anissa and Morgan were both arrested and tried, and both found not guilty by reason of mental disease. They were 12. Anissa was ordered to be confined to a psychiatric facility for 25 years, but she walked out after just 4. Morgan, who did the stabbing, got 40 years. And now Morgan has served 7 years, but she too is on the brink of release. Not full-on freedom, but transfer to a halfway house with round-the-clock supervision. And while that may not sit well with a lot of you watching right now, hold on to your seat for a minute. Because Morgan hasn't been squeaky clean, shall we say, while in lockup. Since the beginning of this year, complaints have surfaced that Morgan had a relationship with a murder memorabilia collector while she was being held in this facility. Her advocates say the relationship was one way and that Morgan ended it. But that person visited. There were also claims that Morgan reads violent crime novels behind bars, including one about organ trafficking, a book called Rent Boy. The defense says that Morgan never tried to hide these books. Today, all sides were back in court so that the judge could sign off on the halfway house transfer, but suddenly, the state raised what they called a very large problem, end quote. The group home that officials had selected is just 8 miles from the victim's house. The victim's mother told the court she's, quote, very concerned. It's an understatement. Apparently, the judge was too. So they're all supposed to come back and consider this new placement in a month. But my question is, why is she being considered for release at all, given these predilections that she's got? I'm joined now by my friend Mark Garagos, criminal defense attorney and co-host of the hit podcasts Reasonable Doubt and 2 Angry Men. Help me get my head around this, Mark. She's supposed to go away for 40 years. We're into it for 10. She's got a friend who's a murder memorabilia collector visiting her at this facility, and she's reading books about organ transfer. How does she get good time or any time at all?
It's mainly a product of the mental health system. The problem with the criminal justice system is when you try to apply it or put it overlay it on a mental health issue, and that's what you have here. And a lot of times the system is ill-equipped to deal with mental health. I can't tell you how many cases where they get pinged back and forth between the criminal justice system and the mental health facility and back and forth. And there's never a real satisfying answer. I think it's probably more fundamental to the problems that we have writ large in society with mental health. Mental health should not be something that's dealt with in the criminal justice system. Clearly here, she was put into the mental health system and then brought back to the criminal justice system to deal with it. And they're just ill-equipped and they don't have the background for it.
Well, look, I'm not and I never have been a fan of saying, take a 12-year-old who does something horrendous and then lock them away and throw away the key. However, I am also very mindful that this little girl survived, that her mother and her family has lived hell ever since, and knowing that the perpetrators of this hideous crime that they thought was just that she just had to die, could be out and walking among them again with these existing mental health conditions. It's very, very upsetting. Does the family have a say here? Does the family of the victim have any say in any of this?
Absolutely. I mean, the family victims have rights. They've got constitutional rights in most jurisdictions. They do have a say, and that's one of the reasons that there was a stop to this, because of the rule, basically, that they can give voice or give what's normally called an impact. So clearly they can. But on the other hand, you do have this situation where 12-year-olds are not fully formed, and that's not to excuse anything, but it does explain a lot of what's happening here. And it's just it's a horrible case from every different angle. There's nothing satisfying about this case in any way, shape, or form.
I'll tell you what, it would be hard enough if this child and now adult had done everything right and, you know, checked every box and looked perfectly healthy and ready for release after just 10 years of a 40-year sentence, it would be hard enough for that family of the poor, the Lautner family, Peyton Lautner's family, the child who was stabbed. But you have this additional insult, which is that this kid, 23 years old, is visiting with a murder memorabilia aficionado and reading twisted books. That, to me, doesn't sound like somebody who qualifies. How can she?
Well, the murder memorabilia person, at least there's a suggestion that that was unilateral, that was not something that she had engaged in. I don't know. I'm not close enough to the facts.
He visited.
I haven't talked to the lawyer. But, right, visited. But I don't know if that was more somebody who had kind of insinuated themselves into this for their own purposes or whether it was somebody who was invited in. Who knows? I mean, that's up to the judge to get to the bottom of that. I imagine the reason the judge pressed pause, I think one of your producers had told me he was retiring in a couple of days. If I got the facts straight, maybe he just wanted to kick the can down the road and let somebody else make the decision.
Retires on Wednesday. You got that right. Mark Garagos, I always love having you on. This was a really upsetting one. I appreciate you giving some context to it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a tough case.
It really is. It really is. I'll see you again soon, my friend. Any guesses how long we've had police body cams? It's hard to remember when we didn't. But believe it or not, they didn't show up in this country until 2012, just 13 years ago. And for comparison, the iPhone came out in 2007. Pre-body cam, the details of a traffic stop or a highway chase or a takedown were pretty much whatever the cops involved said they were, unless, of course, there was like an independent witness somewhere. But way back in 1991, camcorders were a thing, just barely. And let me tell you, not everyone had one. But George Holliday did. He lived in LA, and when he happened to notice some police getting rough, like really, really, really rough, with a guy that they'd pulled over, he started rolling his camcorder. The man whom officers were beating and tasing and stomping and striking with batons, that was Rodney King. And Holliday's grainy video lasted 9 minutes and 20 seconds. It became the star witness in the 1992 trial of 4 of those officers. But those cops were acquitted 33 years ago this week. And a huge number of Angelenos were outraged. 3 hours after the verdict, riots broke out in South Central and spread from there into some of the most jaw-dropping chaos that city has ever seen. And our NewsNation affiliate, KTLA, was live for all of it.
You are watching continuing coverage of LA Under Siege here on KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles.
April 30th, 1992. The KTLA Morning News is less than a year old, and we're covering the story of a city that is out of control.
We have not moved. Police have left, and these looters, the people are coming in here again in large numbers, taking what they see left in these stores that have been destroyed or heavily damaged. And it's like a festival. I don't know how else to describe it.
Are there no officers there, Warren, at all?
No, there are no officers here now. They were here earlier, but they had to be called to another location after they cleared this out.
It's a free-for-all as people loot and burn businesses in South Central LA.
How many people will it take to stop this?
On the morning after the 4 cops involved in the Rodney King beating were acquitted.
And you see a lot of people running around here in the parking lot. They have broken the windows to a sporting goods store, which is very frightening because you imagine that there might be weapons inside there.
For our crews on the ground that morning, it was downright dangerous.
There are some very angry feelings among this crowd. In fact, we've had to get up on top of our truck to broadcast to you because they wouldn't let us get through and get pictures.
But we did get pictures of one man who refused to just watch while the city burned.
What we are doing is standing on the roof of an apartment, and with this gentleman here telling me, "What, sir, you're fighting here. Why are you fighting here by yourself with your water hose?"
trying to help my people, brother.
More looting going on.
The chaos continued all day. Black columns of smoke filled the sky until National Guard troops rolled in later on, the first of 4,000 who would patrol the streets. And by the next morning, we were finally seeing a sign of hope.
This is a group of people who are cleaning up, and it's a spontaneous group of people. They're carrying brooms. They've got dumpsters that they're rolling along south.
Man, that video. Today's May 1st, right? And on May 1st of that year, 33 years ago, an emotional Rodney King gave an impromptu news conference outside of his lawyer's office and made this now infamous plea.
I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along?
I should have said famous plea. It's not an infamous plea. It was a famous plea. The major rioting stopped that day, but some smaller riots continued. Active duty military stayed in the city until May 9th to keep the peace. The National Guard stayed until the 14th. All told, the riots resulted in 63 deaths, more than 2,000 injuries, and 12,000 arrests. And property damage topped $1 billion. Again, 33 years ago, $1 billion. So it started as a search for 3 hit-and-run suspects in Los Angeles, and it ended with an armed standoff between police and the wife of a rock star. Actually, it ended with police shooting that rock star's wife in the shoulder. Her name is Jillian Schreiner, and she is married to the bassist in the band Weezer. His name's Scott Schreiner. And now, for the first time, we are seeing the officer's body cam video, and it looks like nobody seemed to know who each other was in this wild standoff. See for yourself.
Hey, hold it for me. We got I have an armed resident. We're in the rear.
Hey, put the gun down!
Put it down! Put it down on the ground! Put it down on the ground!
Could I help call for a 450 female with a gun? We'll be behind the residence.
Lay the gun down!
Lay the gun down!
We got one at gunpoint, got an armed suspect. Do not! Man, put the gun down!
Put the gun down!
Put the gun down!
She's walking away.
Party's walking in our direction.
Yeah.
She's armed.
Long gray shirt, black hair, black pants. She has a gun in her hand.
Put the gun down!
Yeah, she lifts that gun. Man, put the gun down, okay? You have cover?
Yeah. Do you have visual of her?
Yeah, I can't see her right now. The gun's not up.
Ma'am, we're trying to help you.
Ma'am, put the gun down.
Come on with your hands up.
Drop the gun. You're gonna get shot. You're getting shot. It's the police.
Put the gun down.
Hey, what is she
doing?
I can't see from. What is she doing right now?
Hey, she just pointed it. Not at us, but she just lifted it up. Oh, she wrapped it.
Get down, get down. Shots fired.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Officer needs help.
Holy cow. There's Jillian. After she was shot in the shoulder, she ended up going back into the house. And then she calls 911. And we learned that while the police thought that she was one of the suspects, there she is with the gun, she thought that the police, were the suspects. And here's what she told the dispatcher.
She says there were 3 men and one of them shot her, and the cops are looking for him right now. They have their guns out, and I don't know if they found him yet or not, but they told me to not look out the window, so I'm not doing that.
So he's not in your yard. You don't know that he's there?
Well, he was in my yard because that's where he shot her.
Oh, okay.
He shot from the other side? Okay, he shot from the other side of the gate.
Other side. I had my gun.
Okay.
And he said, put down that gun, put down that gun. I said, put down your gun.
Oh,
and then he shot me.
So Jillian's got someone else who's made the call, and you can hear her in the background. And because Jillian fired her gun towards the officers, She was booked on suspicion of attempted murder of a police officer and released on $1 million bail, and she's expected to be in court on Wednesday. But as for the real hit-and-run suspects, police did capture one of them after the shooting, but the other two are still on the run somewhere. So pretty action-packed. We'll keep you posted on what happens when she shows up in court.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.